Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Thursday, April 6th, 2017 edition of VR News. Quick shout out to viewer of the channel, Diminor3, for his acceptance into grad school. Cheers, mate, on that. Let's start with Vanishing Realms. Vanishing Realms has been available on HTC Vive since launch. One of my favorite games, not because it was technically brilliant, but because it showed the potential for virtual reality. The combat system, for example, hinted at what is definitely to come 5, 10, 15 years from now. And it was a lot of fun just exploring. It made really, really good use of room scale. Now, the game is very, very close to launching into full release and leaving early access. Initially, this upset a lot of fans. They didn't understand necessarily. It wasn't, the greatest communication between the dev and the fans in terms of what they would get for the full release. He then posted a very comprehensive roadmap, which fleshes that out quite a bit better and shows exactly what the plan is for Chapter 1 and 2, i.e. bugs quashed and all the features that he had planned for Chapter 1 and 2 being present. So I think there's enough substance there if you beat the game previous to play it again. He also mentioned that Chapter 3 is going to be released likely as DLC. So not as a whole new version, but as DLC, which I've got no problem with. I think that's fair, given the play value of what you get. Next game, Eve Valkyrie. So this is a game that I play from time to time. Doesn't come close for me to Elite Dangerous because it's just got the combat element. And that's enough for some people. I totally get that. I'm just talking me personally. So April 11th, the latest update's going to be released. It's called Groundrush. And as you can probably guess by the name, that's exactly what it means. You've now got the obstacle of the ground to contend with. Now, according to those who've tried it, they were blown away by some of the canyon chases you can get yourself into, that they were every bit as adrenaline pounding as the iconic trench scene from Star Wars, for example. So definitely excited. April 11th is when that gets released. That'll be one that I try. Next one, HTC wants to bring its first-party game, Arcade Saga, to the PlayStation VR. Now, this is a game that obviously launched for HTC Vive initially, and true to their word, yes, there are still things that could definitely benefit from being more open, like Steam to begin with, but at least they have mostly stood behind what they've said in terms of openness. And, whether that's having full Rift support on Steam VR or just being okay with creating games not just on the HTC Vive. This was later ported to Arcade Saga, and now, of course, as the story says, PlayStation VR. So, no idea if it's any good. Definitely going to take a look at it, though, when it's formally launched. Next story. Now, there are some of you that have in the past razzed me about my toys. I do have a lot of toys. Now, a lot of these toys were a long time in the collecting, and some of them were just born out of a lifelong dream, like the arcade cabinet, which I had 3D rendered and then built to match that 3D render. So, love that thing, right? My VR stuff, love it all. But this, guys, take a look at this. If I had this, and now, of course, it's probably going to be some, hidden obsession with me that in my subconscious I'm going to strive for. But take a look. I'll just let the picture and a little bit of the video do the talking. So this is from user Mokkun1. He's a YouTube content provider. This is his baby. 25,000 US. Now, I've always said cockpit games are the natural fit for non-room scale VR games, because in-game you're sitting, in real life you're doing the exact same thing, sitting. And whether it's little immersive things like lining up my HOTAS exactly like, it is in Elite Dangerous, to using steering wheel for racing games, that adds a ton of immersion in VR. But what he's done with the Aircraft multi-axis motion simulator, which was $20,000 US alone, the balance of the stuff is the $5,000. The 20 was just that unit. But imagine this. Just imagine how freaking awesome this would be to have in your space. Now, apply that to Elite Dangerous and a bunch of other games. Valkyrie. All I can do is drool, guys, and quickly move on so that the envy doesn't overwhelm me. All right, next story. HTC apparently has been trimming the weight of its HMD since launch. So when it originally came out, 550 grams. Apparently, the versions that are selling now, 468 grams. So that's a 15% reduction in weight. Now, personally, I don't think it's going to address what a lot of people have as an issue with the Vive, which is the comfort. I'm okay with the Vive for 30 to 90 minutes. I'm not so sure if I use the Vive as much as I use my Rift, say in like Elite Dangerous, where 3-4 hour sessions are not uncommon, if I would be that comfortable. I mean, after the 30 to 90 minutes, I've got red marks on the face, etc., because it's very front heavy. And the weight reduction is great, but if it's not distributed equally, it could possibly even make things worse in a sense, especially if it's skewed and you end up having more weight even up front versus throughout the rest of the HMD. But either way, less weight, not a bad thing. Throw in the new 3-in-1 cable, which is much thinner, less bulk, and less weight. And it's probably more comfortable overall than it was at launch. I would definitely at least say that. Next story. The specs that are going to power Microsoft's Project Scorpio potential VR experiences. I say potential because even though Microsoft has made moves recently, for example, Xbox One games are going to appear on PC, they haven't really talked about VR much recently. They have in the past, not recently. Certainly this thing has the potential to run VR. Let's take a look at the specs. I'm going to show you guys a picture that actually comes from a YouTube channel called Digital Foundry. Really good channel for benchmark enthusiasts. Now it compares. On the left, you can see Project Scorpio. On the right, you see the PS4 Pro. Pretty much on par processor-wise. Yeah, there's a bit of a difference there. 2.1 on the Pro versus 2.3. One is Jaguar, one isn't. It's custom. Then you've got the GPU. Again, not a huge amount of difference there. RAM, both GDDR5, but you're talking 8 gigs and 12. Some difference there. We start to see a little bit of a difference, but it's the memory bandwidth that is the key tell. On paper, that's about a third more performance. What that actually translates to in a given game, we're not going to be sure until we get to see test results. Benchmarks come out on this, but on paper, certainly, probably about 33% faster. So hopefully that holds. Can't wait to see it. But in theory, if they do VR, that bodes well for 1080p, 90 frames per second. Hell, natively, they're probably going to be able to pull off 4K at 60 frames per second, just for non-VR games, I mean. So hopefully, as we get closer to the end of the year, we find out what the plans for VR are with Project Scorpio. This next story, kind of one of the tug on your heartstrings type stories. It's called VR4 Good, How One Dad is Using VR to Help His Daughter. Now, the dad in question, he's from the UK. This was an article on Upload VR, and his daughter, Imogen, she has what's called Williams syndrome, and it makes it extremely difficult for her to learn numbers, to learn names, labels, words for things, for everyday objects. He discovered on accident, well, he had a hunch it may assist her with developmental learning, etc., to buy a VR unit, which he did, a mobile one. They don't specify. I'm pretty sure based on the picture it was the Gear VR. I'll have to go back and check. But saw her absolutely thrive on this. And she was able to learn concepts, label things, even numbers that she wasn't able to do pre-VR. Now, obviously, this isn't some kind of cure or, miracle fix all. No, it's just a tool, in the family's arsenal now to assist her with her learning challenges. So very freaking cool. Not only did she like it, and essentially he's created his own videos and 360-degree experiences for his daughter, but he's also been able to bring it to her special needs school and have other students try it and get similar positive results. So very freaking cool. All right, the next and last story, guys, this has to do with a single but more involved in real life Iraqi war veteran able to treat his PTSD through virtual reality. Now, just quick anecdotal. For me, war has always been a tricky thing, especially World War II, because my parents literally come from opposite sides in the conflict. I've got my Dutch grandfather who was part of the Dutch resistance, guerrilla fighters, if you will, and then my German grandfather who was part of the German military machine. And he was court-martialed. He spoke out, which is one of the things that you don't do. First time he got off, second time he got sent to the Russian front, ended up in a gulag, and, had to endure some just absolutely horrific stuff, eating rats, insects, the odd raw potato from the Russian ladies who would hide them in their skirts, etc. PTSD is not something that was around in my grandfather's lifetime. I mean, they'd only started talking about that in the 70s and 80s after the Vietnam War. The things that would happen to him, like he would wake up in the middle of the night screaming in Russian. He never spoke Russian, but he learned Russian during his captivity, and it would only be in those nightmare episodes that he would speak and mumble in Russian. So would have been nice if this was available for my grandfather, for example. And what this is essentially a tool to allow the veterans at their own pacing, supervised, to experience events similar to what they experienced in Iraq, but through VR. The advantages being they can replay it. Because one of the things that helps the healing process, apparently, with PTSD is not just talking about the experiences, but if you're actually able to kind of relive them, whether it's, like I said, verbally, or in this case in VR, almost semi-realistically. And I'm all for anything that can improve, a veteran's mental health. That's an important thing. They deserve it, absolutely, regardless, of what your opinion is on war. I think most people will agree. They certainly have that right. And it's nice to see technology like this. And we've talked about so many different uses. Medical come up many times, but mental health specifically, very, very cool. So all of that is going to be shown on tonight's season 2 premiere of a series called Darknet. And it's a Showtime channel series about veterans of Iraq treating the PTSD with VR. There you are, guys. That's it for the news tonight. Sorry to leave on a somber note, but, I think it's a happy note because it's going to allow them to deal with it. Next up will be the gaming recap video. Guys, as always, Gaming Friday tomorrow. Woo! Cheers.